Do you miss the free and affordable ads and social networks without all of the anti-sex rhetoric?
Assembly 4 is a team of sex workers and technologists from Melbourne, Australia, aiming to bring back free and fair advertising and social spaces to the sex working community.
Stepping away from the clunky design of traditional platforms, their two products, Tryst.link and Switter.at, are refreshing and well-needed changes in both presentation and mission.
And both are free to join and open to all.
You can find both of our profiles on Tryst, and I love how it is so clearly designed by sex workers.
Yep, and I love how straightforward and easy it is to use and how much they clearly support the sex working community.
And also how responsive they are when it comes to feedback and customer service.
Check out their website assembly4.com for the word, not the number, for more info.
Welcome to Somebody You Love, or The Sale of Two Titties. I'm Jenna Love.
And I'm Holly Hart.
And we're experts in disappointing our parents, breaching community guidelines, and banging the people who vote against our rights. We'd like to begin today by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we are recording. I am Jenna, and I am on Darug and Gundungurra land. Holly is on the land of the Ngunnawal people, and we have Chantell calling in from the land of the Wangal clan of the Eora Nation. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and we extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who may be listening. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land.
On this show, we tell stories from our own experiences as sex workers. Every sex worker will have their own unique experience. Some will be bad, some will be good, and most, just like ours, will be a blend of both, as with any job. Mainstream media often only shows the very good or the very bad. It's our goal with this podcast to humanise sex workers and show all the stuff in between that the media ignores, but we do acknowledge that we cannot capture the full range of experiences that exist in our whole community.
Now, there are a lot of content warnings to go with this episode. We are discussing street-based sex work, whorephobia and transphobia, drug use, police entrapment, and some violence. There is also use of the T word in relation to transgender individuals and the P word in relation to sex workers.
Chantell is a transgender community service worker and activist at SWOP New South Wales and former street-based sex worker. She moved from New Zealand to Sydney in the 80s and at that time began her gender transition, entered the sex industry and began using drugs. She worked through the height of the AIDS epidemic in the 80s, before and after decrim in the 90s, and is now doing outreach helping the community through the COVID-19 pandemic.
Hello, Chantell. How are you?
Hey, Chantell.
Hi, how are you? I'm well, thank you.
Oh, fabulous. Thank you so much for being on the show.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
So you moved to Australia from New Zealand, I think, in the 80s.
I did.
And when you moved here, you became a sex worker and you started your transition. So was that your plan when you were coming here, or did it just sort of happen?
It sort of like just happened. I mean, my big plan was to travel the world, and I had a round the world ticket at the time, and Australia was my first stop. So I got here to Australia in the 80s, and I discovered the nightlife. Because in New Zealand at the time, all the nightlife shut at 11. Okay.
Of course. Well, much like Sydney now.
Yeah.
We've swapped.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So everything shut really early unless you lived in the big cities like Auckland, Wellington or Christchurch. Okay. I didn't come from any of those cities. I came from a smaller city. So everything closed at 11. So, of course, when I hit the shores of Australia and, hit the cross, I hit everything else as well, and it was amazing. I had the best time. And it's kind of like 24-hour shops and clubs and partying, and so that's what I got caught up in was the nightlife. And then, of course, I, ran out of money and I needed money. I didn't have a job. Back then, it was really, really hard in the 80s for Kiwis to get jobs over here because previously a handful of naughty Kiwis had come over, got on a dole, worked for about 6 months, got on a dole and spent the rest of their bloody life on the beach, okay? So the government here went, right, we're going to put an end to that, right? And so it became really, really hard to get a job over here for me. When I fell on hard times and needed the money, I met a couple of trans workers from Auckland. And I told them about my predicament, and I said to them, oh, look, I'm about to get kicked out of my unit. And they said, well, love, you're going to have to come down the street and sell your hole. And I went, what do you mean, And they said, you're just going to have to come down and do what we do. So I thought, I couldn't do that. I just possibly couldn't do that. But a couple of my friends, of course, it was at the very beginning of my transition as well. I hadn't transitioned yet. So they threw me in a frock and then they said, come on, get down the street. And it was like a nightmare. I thought look, number one, couldn't walk in heels, right? Never worn a bloody dress before. Never put makeup on. Oh my God, it was like tragic. It was like tragedy on heels. And that was my entrance into the sex industry. I mean, of course, it didn't take me long to pick it up and, get into the swing of it and get used to the clients pulling up on cars. The whole scene was really, really different. Have I thought the nightlife here was something? Being in the sex industry and transitioning, it's not something that I would recommend for anyone who's just starting out to transition, is to go into street-based sex work, because you've just got to be focused on so many things, Sex work itself back then in the 80s, you're constantly jumping in and out of cars, and you don't know whose car you're jumping into. So you're just jumping in there, doing the job, and then getting out and then jumping in the next car. You're copping a lot of flack from the public. They're throwing bottles at you, they're calling your names. As a trans worker, we were always called boys, or, you're a man and show us your balls and all of that sort of stuff. So there was a whole lot of stuff going on in my life and many of the other sisters' lives who had transitioned at that time in the sex industry. We had to deal with that on a personal level, but then we also had to deal with, the stigma and discrimination in the sex industry on the street as a trans sex worker. So it was, I wouldn't say it was fun. It didn't become fun until I got used to working the street and knowing the rules, because there's rules and different ways of keeping yourself safe. And the other thing about it, which I know we're going to be talking about later, is that sex work was criminalised. So it was a criminal to be a sex worker back then, So we had to worry about not only the public, but we had to worry about the police, and we also had to worry about clients that would pull little numbers on us. Nothing compared to what's happening now, but some are still doing the same thing. But it was twice as worse back then, So
God, yeah.
How did you find? So you obviously had this. It sounds like you had a group of good friends who were sex working and who were trans or transitioning as well. It sounds to me like that was crucial to you being able to survive in that world. How did you interact much with cis workers? Did you find that you were treated differently, or?
Yeah, we look. There were back then also too. The street was split up into different sections. Okay, so a lot of the trans workers would work in a laneway now called Premier Lane. And that's where a lot of us were put. It's a dark, dingy lane in the back. Back in the day, it was called Tranny Lane. I don't mean to be offensive to any of my sisters out there who don't prefer that name, but it used to be called Tranny Lane, because we were all working there. But it was dangerous in that laneway. What happened was a lot of new property developments were going up in that area. So then the council realised, oh my God, we've got to move these prostitutes away from that area, so they put us down onto the street. So it kind of like we were only allowed to work between this set of lights and that set of lights. So we were boxed into a little tight area. It was illegal to work on any of the side streets that ran off William Street. And so we only had each other And we formed a really, really strong sisterhood, and I mean that in the best way possible, because we did everything together. We had ways of protecting ourselves, like if I jumped in a car with a client and drove past one of the girls, she'd notice the colour of the car. The next girl would notice the number plate. The next girl would notice maybe the client with a mustache. So there were 3 ways of identifying where I went and who I went with. And this, mind you, this is all before mobile phones,
Yeah.
So we had to come up with other ideas of keeping ourselves safe. And that was the way we would do it. So if I never got back within a certain time, because we all knew how long it took to do a car job, from an hour for sex in a car, or if it's just a quick heady, it would be, half an hour to 15 minutes. So we all knew the timing. So if I wasn't back within an hour, then they'd all start asking questions like, hey, where did Chantell go? She's not back yet. Or if I've come back, I've gone to score. And so the girls was, no, she's back. She's gone up the road, to get, what she usually gets. So we all kept an eye on each other, and that sisterhood was tight, really, really, really tight. But we did everything together. Like I said, we worked together. We fought together. Oh my God, did we ever? It was just like family, it was just horrible. The things we did to each other, we would steal off each other, we would tell lies to each other, but we would also we cried together, we protected each other, no matter, I could have a fight with one of the girls the night before, and then the next day it's done, we're over it. And it's kind of like we'd remind each other what we've done, and that's it, and move on. Because you didn't really have the time to hold a grudge against each other, because you only had a small space to work in, But the good thing about
and you had to have each other's backs.
Yes, and we had to. And no matter what we did to each other, that's the main thing that we did, was we always made sure that we were safe. And, of course, the street-based sex work back then is very different to how it is now. There were, hundreds of people going up that street into the Cross, because it's the street that goes into King's Cross, you see, and Thursday, Friday and Saturday nights were bumper to bumper with cars. The cars would go all the way back down William Street into the city, and it would take a car from the city, say maybe Elizabeth Street, coming along William Street going into King's Cross. It would take a car between a half an hour to 45 minutes just to get to the spot where we were. And that's how it was. It was just a row of lights going all the way back into the city. Buses would come down with, what do you call them, guys that are about to get married?
Like bachelors.
Bucks night,
Like,
them,
Bucks nights.
Yeah. So busloads of bucks would come down, right, just to see the trans workers, and maybe tie one of the bucks up to the power pole where we worked, and then slap a sign on him, saying "Toot if you think I'm gorgeous," and he's oh my God, it was hilarious. So there were moments of fun, but there were also moments of, where it wasn't so much fun.
Can I just ask, when you say that the new development or the builders of new developments moved you on, does that mean that, they were calling law enforcement, or, how did they get you to be from one street to the next? How does that work?
A lot of it was from residents, reporting that we were in the area, because Premier Lane is actually off a few of the streets down there that were illegal, so there was all residents there in that area. So when the property developments, it was the council that actually moved us on, because when you have a new property development, of course, it's going to go up there, and of course that, the people that live in that new property are going to say, right, there's prostitutes down there, and that's so disgusting. You guys need to do something about it. And so that's how they were able to move us on. Because prior to Premier Lane, they used to have us in Darley Street, which is further up, well before my time.
Forgive my total ignorance here, but so technically street-based work was illegal, but they would turn a blind eye to those streets. Is that correct? Or the streets were actually legal to work on?
Yeah, no, William Street was the only legal part of that street, and the red light district was only that little strip, okay? The side streets were totally illegal, and it made it really, really hard because clients don't want to pick you up on a busy street, right?
Yeah.
Because there's too many lights, okay? They don't want to get spotted by a family member or their wife, heavens forbid, or, a friend that's driving up through, the cross. So they don't want to
There's no privacy.
No,
Yeah.
and so what they used to do is swing down the side streets. Of course, then we'd run over, get to jump in the car, and then bang, the cops would be there, and they'd all be undercover as well, and they'd have an undercover sitting down at the end of the side streets, just waiting, waiting to catch you. So there were,
great use of taxpayers' dollars.
Oh, isn't it?
Yeah. Wonderful.
Absolutely, and the entrapment was just, appalling. But that's the way it was.
And they would pose as clients?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you'd never know. You'd jump in the car, and then as soon as you hear the central locking go off, you knew straight away that you were done. That's what happened to me. I got picked up in the side street. I jumped in the car, and as soon as I heard the central locking lock, I thought, damn, and I couldn't say to him, well, you didn't tell me you were an officer. They didn't really care. You're done. Yeah, there also used to be a quota for the police to arrest back in those days. Okay, so maybe every fortnight between 12 and 15 workers, whether they be trans or cisgendered workers or male workers, but they had to have that quota every fortnight. Different times also too, because if you were caught down on the street working, you were given one warning, and if you were back down there, the following, they gave you a week's warning. So say if they warned me on a Thursday, if I was back down there the following Thursday, I was gone. They would pick me up and take me away,
So that affects your ability. If you know that, then you can't work on that day, and then you can't earn an income. Or you do, and you take that risk.
Very different times. And I think it's good to know, and I didn't find this out until I started working for SWOP, but there was a partial decriminalisation of the sex industry, street-based sex industry only, back in 1979. So, but for whatever reason that was made for, it never helped us, So I don't know what good that was to partially decriminalise the street-based sex workers, because what happened was the police were still arresting us, they were still coming down and taking our money, and driving us out to Penrith or Parramatta and dropping us off and getting us to find our own way back into the city. So I kind of when I found out that there was partial decriminalisation of the street-based of the street-based sex working area, I thought to myself, well, we never felt any of that. We totally felt the opposite, So I don't know.
I've never heard of that. That's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, I never heard of it, and we never heard of it either until I started working for SWOP.
You were directly affected by it.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, oh, okay, well, you could have fooled me.
So as you said, it was such a different time, obviously. Can you share a little bit of what it was like to be a transgender, drug-using, street-based sex worker at the height of the AIDS epidemic?
So I guess as a trans worker, things were as good as they were ever going to get for a lot of us. At least we had each other. Okay. It was hard. But we may do as a drug user. A lot of us, a majority of us, had to be on something. To be down there, to deal with all of the drama that came with it, It wasn't because we wanted to be on drugs. It's just that, when you hurled accusations day in and day out and had bottles and bricks and stuff thrown at you day in and day out, okay, you kind of need something to take the edge off, right? And so drugs is it for us, or alcohol. The unfortunate thing about it is the longer you use those substances, the more addicted you become to them, and that's something I wasn't aware of back then. I mean, I just, it's something that we just did. And then, of course, when you've been down there for many years, like I was down there for over 20 years, And so got to see and experience a lot, and this is nothing against drugs, full stop. I mean, hey, it started off fantastic. Loved it, it was pleasurable. But, when you have to take drugs to sort of like block things out, especially in that scene and at that time, it will take its toll. So it did eventually bring me to my knees. Absolutely. And I saw it ruin a lot of other workers as well, But also, that's just our story, who used drugs and alcohol. I worked with sisters who never used drugs, and they were able to come down there and work quite, it was just not our thing, And
well, we all have different coping mechanisms as well, don't we? I mean, I've never had alcohol in my life, but I can tell you I've got some less than healthy coping mechanisms,
And I definitely used drugs to cope with a lot of my life in my youth, so I get that.
Yeah. And I think as a trans sex worker, I think there was the stuff that I had to deal with work, but then there was also the other emotional stuff and what I was going through as a trans woman, and transitioning and everything that went with that, like family stuff and, coping with society and society coping with me, and being accepted,
There's a lot to do.
And all of that stuff. So, and that's why I say to a lot of people, I tell my story to, just choose one thing first, work on one thing first. Don't do the whole three, because I did the whole three. I did the sex work, the transition, and the drugs, and kind of like, I guess you could say in a way, the drugs kind of like, helped me cope with the other two a lot better, So they all, for me, they served a purpose, and even though they did bring me to my knees in the end, I mean, I'm grateful for that experience. I don't have no regrets about using drugs or doing what I did. And yes, using drugs and too many drugs, I guess, when working as a sex worker, there were moments where I had taken risks, and that just comes part and parcel with when you overdo things.
I mean, but we all take risks in our life and in our sex work, and they're different levels of risk, and we navigate them. And that's what you do as a human being. We take risks every single day.
Exactly, and I'm here today to tell my story and to share it. So I mean, again, it's something to just be aware of.
Of course. So you've touched on that we apparently had some sort of decrim from 1979, but did you notice a difference? Are you able to compare your experiences as a sex worker working before and after the proper decrim that was brought in 1995?
Absolutely. I guess because I had worked prior to that, from the 80s right up to 1995, I saw a huge change, and a lot of workers, street-based sex workers from that time, saw a lot of change. Amazing change where we were now able to report a crime if it happened to us, which we couldn't do when it was criminalised. If a client did something to us, we could have that seen to by seeking legal advice, which comes with decrim. We got better health, whereas before, if you identified or if the healthcare worker found out you were a sex worker back when it was criminalised, they could report you. And so a lot of us wouldn't go and get tested because of that fact, because we didn't want to run the fact of getting, booked. So those are just some of the changes that I saw, but definitely the worst perpetrators to us when it was criminalised were the police. And that's where I and many of my sisters noticed a very big change and a very big difference. And some of my sisters were not convinced that these police were doing the right thing because they just had experienced so much drama before in the past that they just were not going to trust the police at all.
Of course, there's such a deep trauma there that you can't expect someone to just switch off.
Yeah, and look, and some of that stuff is still around today. 25 years on, it's still around today. I mean, like you can still, I don't think there aren't too many workers that will walk straight into a police station and say, right, I want to report a sexual assault, or I want to report this client did this to me, Not many of them will do that because of the fact of that stigma is still around, How am I guaranteed that if I walk into the police station and tell you what happened to me, what's the guarantee of it getting seen to, without me being...
Yeah, I've done that, and I'm a cis white woman who's middle class. I walked in with my straight husband. I'm, very acceptable in traditional society, and I was packing it. It was incredibly nerve-wracking, and thankfully my experience was a positive one. But I don't blame any sex worker for not wanting to go near a police station.
Yes, yeah. Whereas some of us, especially the cheeky ones like myself, who used to always stand up to the police and sort of like call them names, because they really loved calling us names, and they really would aim it at our gender. So they would always call us boys, and we'd always yell back and say, "We're fine, girls." And we'd had that little banter, but because we got so used to doing that with each other, it became normal. But once decrim came in, that all changed. They had to address us as who we were in the proper manner. They weren't allowed to come down and yell accusations and hurl, bad things at us anymore. We weren't. Funnily enough, when they stopped, we stopped. But in some cases, for me anyway, for a lot of the other girls, it wasn't the same story. But I guess because I stood up to the police a lot before, and when it was criminalised, I mean, the changeover made it a lot easier for me, because they, at first I was surprised that they were even pulling up and saying, "Good evening, ladies, and how was your night?" And it's kind of like, oh, I'm very suspicious here, And I'd say to them, "What's going on? What are you guys up to?" And they go, no, this is the new thing. This is what we're trying out. And I said, well, I don't know how to take that. It took a while. It took a while for them to keep coming down and doing that before it was accepted. Of course, there were still other workers that would never ever go near them, even no matter how good they pretended to be.
Sure. Yeah, fair enough.
So those are just some of the things that changed. Of course, it goes a lot bigger as well when you're talking about brothels and stuff like that. Because when decrim came in, it had to be. That's where decrim was taken. The criminalisation of sex workers was taken off the police and given to other services like the council, for instance. They were the guys who had to sort it out, and they'd never ever experienced that before, apart from maybe the occasional DA for a brothel that went across their desk. But, oh my God, now we've been given the whole of the sex industry to deal with, and we don't have any template, we don't have anything set up. So that changed a lot.
We've had decrim in New South Wales for a quarter of a century. Do you think that we still have a long way to go with the sex worker rights movement?
Yes, we do. We do. Just branching on that a little, when we got decrim back in 1995, there were certain things that should have been added to that decrim, like, for instance, how councils today are not on the same page. So they're just not, and I say that because you can go into, a city of Sydney and work, and two of you can work in a unit, whereas if you cross over and go to another council, it's not allowed, and then if you go out further and go up to maybe Gosford, they won't allow you to work at all. And this is something I learnt from an activist and advocate way back in the day, where she was a part of that movement on, getting decrim together, because it was sex workers who pulled that together, Sex workers got together and then put all of that together, teamed up with, doctors and politicians, and they went for it and they got us decrim, And when we got decrim, the politician that was helping out, because the workers, of course, said, okay, now that we've got decrim, let's hurry up and put things in place, right? One of those things was to get the councils on the same page, okay? Yeah. The politician at the time said, hey, look, you know what? You've got decrim. be satisfied with that for now. Okay, we'll work on the council stuff later down the track. Well, 25 years later, we're still working on it. It's not even been brought up. It's not even been done. Nothing's been done about it. And so now you have councils making up all these different rules for themselves, where nothing is congruent, so, and also too, they've got hideous laws where you have to, if you're going to set up a brothel, it's got to be in an industrial area, and all of that stuff, and that then puts workers, safety at risk because they're way out, away from everywhere. The same rule with, having workers work on their own, sort of like, we work together in pairs because of safety, and like work it out, It's best,
It seems pretty straightforward for us.
Exactly. So you've got all of these different discrepancies. But even though we have decrim now, there's still a lot to do. Tons to do. That was never picked up earlier, Also to decrim it's not a silver bullet. It's not going to, it's not going to be the be all and the a all to everything. And as we've seen, if you go back the 25 years that we've had it, you can just about pretty much tick where it hasn't been okay. Anti-discrimination, that needed to be brought in, and it's only just been addressed now, and so there's still a long way to go. The answer to your question is still a lot of things that need to change for, within decriminalisation for sex workers here. And I mean, look, we are very fortunate to be in this country, to have decrim and to be in New South Wales, because if you're talking globally in the sex industry, oh my God, some of us are still being murdered, for the colour of our skin, because of being trans, because of being a sex worker, full stop. There are countries that are totally against what we're doing and they're murdering us.
Yeah. We do have to remember that, don't we? But at the same time, we have to keep pushing the fight, and we can't settle for leaving anyone behind. So tell it. This moves well into talking about SWOP. So you work with the Sex Worker Outreach Project, the New South Wales branch. Can you tell us a bit about what that is?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so SWOP was born out of decrim, okay, but prior to SWOP, the Ministry of Health set up an organisation called the Australian Prostitutes Collective. Back in the 80s, I think they started. It was only a pilot project, so it started up for the whole purpose so that the Ministry of Health could find out why and how they could reach sex workers, because back then in the 80s, as you all know, that was the start of the AIDS epidemic. So for a lot of communities, there were a few that were marginalised in the way of spreading HIV and vectors of disease and all of those other...
Yeah, well, the media and the politicians didn't exactly help with that marginalisation, did they?
They did not at all. And so what happened with that, because, you've got the gay community that were marginalised, injecting drug users and sex workers. So the Ministry of Health needs to find a way of trying to address those and getting stuff out there like PPE for sex workers and clean and safe injecting equipment for, injecting drug users, and condoms and everything for both sex workers, for the whole three, so they were only able to do that by forming these organisations, and those three are still around today. So we have SWOP, the Australian Prostitutes Collective, that ran over, I think, a period of a year or 2 years maybe, and all of that information and all that data and research that was collected through the Australian Prostitutes Collective was fed back to the Ministry of Health back then. And of course they looked at all of that information and they saw so many positives in having peers deliver health promotion to our own community. We were more receptible to taking condoms or safe and clean injecting equipment from a peer rather than from somebody who's real clinical and is going to throw the book at us first before they actually give us the condoms or whatever. Yeah. So with all that information, they took that away, and then out of that, not long after, we had decrim, and that's where SWOP was born. We're funded by the Ministry of Health. We're not funded enough, though, I feel,
No,
but we're better off than a
course
lot
not.
of other sex worker organisations throughout Australia. Some of them are running on the smell of a bloody oily rag, and just doing the best that they can. And
Literally,
and they're in states that are it's still criminalised, and they don't have decriminalisation. So I take my hat off to our sister organisations in other states, that don't have what SWOP does. But from that, we're funded by the Ministry of Health to do what we do. I mean, without decriminalisation, we wouldn't be able to reach half of the people that we've got or have nearly enough allies that we have today. It's only because SWOP's been able to operate in a decrim system where we're able to go there, we're able to sit on, panels, we're able to have a sex worker voice here everywhere where where it needs to be, especially with the police. So we do that. We do outreach. We outreach to all the brothels and, massage parlours and private sex workers and, street-based sex workers. We do all of that. We run, workshops for our community. Of course, it's all been virtual, but, where else would you find, Private Worker 101, which helps a lot of workers in this day and age, especially with the pandemic, who were brothel workers only, helps them transition over into the private sector,
Look, as a New South Wales worker who doesn't live in the city, I've actually found the online workshops to be more accessible for me. So it's kind of been a positive, I think, for some of us that are, more regional and stuff.
Yep, exactly. So there's all of that stuff there that happens, that SWOP's doing. We know we're at events. We support our local, community and events, like we attend Pride, and just love it. And then we're going to, we work with the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community as well, in that area. Of course, that's a different community altogether when it comes to sex work. They don't identify as sex workers. It's sex for favours or it's opportunistic, and so we've had to change the language there. So we're doing quite a few things, but our website and our Facebook page, just follow us and you'll get to know all the information there.
Sure, that will be all linked in the show notes
Yes,
as usual.
we'll have that.
As Jenna is very organised. So Chantell, what is your role at SWOP, and can you tell us a little bit more about what your role specifically involves?
Okay, so when I originally first started with SWOP, I've been with SWOP now for 12 years. And when I first came here, look, can I just say this first before we go any further about my starting with SWOP, is that I never ever planned or never ever thought that I would be here working as an outreach worker, honestly, because as I mentioned before in my spiel that drugs brought me to my knees. I took myself off and went into rehab and then came out, got my shit together, and then the only thing I wanted to do was I just wanted to be as far away from people as possible, because there was this massive blame game going on for me when I got clean off alcohol and drugs, and it was kind of like I blamed people for my downfall. I blamed the certain jobs that I did for my downfall. And so when I came out of rehab, I just wanted to go as far away from people as possible. And I wanted to be a National Parks and Wildlife Officer, and I wanted to have a cabin in the bush where I saw no humans, where I only had communication with plants and animals who didn't talk back to me or anything like that, right? So clearly that didn't happen. I started doing a course that was going to lead me into conservation and land management as one of the modules for National Parks and Wildlife, but a girlfriend called me up and she knew I had gone to a rehab and got out, and I was, sort of like, she hadn't spoken to me for a while. So she sent me a text message saying, hey, Chantell, did you know that SWOP was looking for an outreach worker? And I texted back and I said, oh, God, what the hell's that? And she said, do you remember when you were on the street working and these two people would come around with their backpacks on their back with all the condoms? I went, oh, of course. I used to grab all my fits from them and all my condoms and lube. She goes, well, that's what they're asking for. But they're actually asking for a transgender outreach worker. And I went, oh. And I just went, oh, I don't know. Because I just, finished working on the street about a year ago and kind of like had all this fear about if I go back near the street that I would go back to using and my life would just go backwards. So I said, okay, so I thought, right, okay, well, I need a bloody job, and it's not the job that I chose, right, but I need a job. So I went for the job interview, and before the job interview, I asked another sister to come with me down to William Street, and she goes, oh my God, you've done so well with yourself. You've put yourself in rehab and everything. And sister, yeah, you're going to go back down onto the street. And I said, it's not what you think, sis. I just need your support just to be down there. I've applied for a job which will take me back down there to the street. And I'm not quite sure whether I'll be able to do it or not because, that was my life down there. And so was my drug life as well, And a lot of the sisters that I used to use with were down there. So there's all this fear about, oh, my God, I need to find out whether I can do this because if I can't go back down onto the street and stand there for 1 hour, okay, it's not the job for me. And I'll just ring them up the next day and just tell SWOP, no, I can't do it. But my girlfriend and I went down there and we stood there. And the 10 workers I didn't want to see were the very 10 workers that turned up.
Of course.
And you know what? It was good. It was good. And the other thing was because I had support as well around me, Like I had my friend there that used to be a worker as well. She knew the score with me and with everything, my drug use and, the working down there. And it was great. It was great to see everyone. And that's what told me that I could do this job. So, I went for the job. I got the job. I still wasn't convinced that this was the job for me because I'd never done that side of sex work, being in the sex industry. I've only been a sex worker. I've only, sucked cock and lick ass, so that's it, and I'm thinking to myself, what am I doing in this job, like, oh my God. I love the fact that I was going down there and helping the girls, but I just wasn't convinced that, that this was for me. And it would have been about 2 years into the job. So pretty much that's a long version of how I got there. But my role is kind of like, so I do trans outreach to any of the sisters or brothers that are out there who, are looking to come into the industry. I guide them in what they need to know, maybe throw into the mix a little bit about my personal experience, do the street outreach, of course, and brothel outreach to a lot of the brothels. I don't like to pin myself in, because when I first started with SWOP, there was the transgender project, there was the male project, and there was the female project, and there was the Aboriginal project. I'm thinking to myself, something, our outreach workers are unbelievable. We are so diverse and versatile that we can just shift over. My community come into the office. They don't necessarily come to see me. No, they'll come in and they'll see anyone who will help them. Occasionally, I'll get a close friend that'll come in, which we love to catch up and talk about old times. But there's that part of the job. I also do a few interagencies. I'm not the only outreach worker that does interagencies, but I do a majority of them, and that means sitting on at meetings, monthly meetings where there are other service providers that are at those meetings, and it's really good to have a sex worker voice there because because our community will cross over and overlap a lot of those services. Like there's drug and alcohol there, and there's mental health services there, there's the police, there's everything, so we get to have a bird's eye view on what's going on, and if there's anything that comes up at that table that's sex worker related, it's my time to chime in and say, okay, well, kind of like the community members saying that they're seeing 50 workers on the street. Well, I can tell you I'm the outreach worker. I'm telling you there's only 5. So I don't know where she's getting her 50 workers from. That kind of like squashes that whole, that stigmatizing and that, all of that stuff quashes that. There is a prison program that we've started up as well at SWOP where we will pop in and see workers who, are incarcerated and especially for trans workers who go into male prisons. They still go into male prisons. So that's, something that's been going for about another 3-4 years now. And the in-services that I do a lot of in-services for SWOP, where I'll go and do some training with organisations, especially health organisations, on, how to deal with workers and don't ask stupid questions when they've just turned up for an STI. You check, don't ask them about, if you happen... Yeah, because the thing is, it's a privilege to know who we are and what we do, okay? So if a worker's going to disclose that to you, okay, respect that, respect that. Don't bloody ask stupid questions like, oh, so you're a sex worker, oh, so how you'd see a lot of clients in a night, or other questions like, how much would you make, or, or worse still, by saying, oh, well, that, this is why you've got an STI, is because you're a sex worker. So all of those sort of stupid questions, I will go into on behalf of SWOP and speak to health workers like doctors and nurses. And it's good insight as well. I let them know about everything, about the history of SWOP and what we do and how we do it and how we work closely together to get the best benefit for our workers and for our community. And because I'm trans, I just throw in the mix and just tweak the old transgender, talk. And
the first time I went to the sexual health clinic that's near me, they had no idea. I don't think the doctor I was dealing with anyway, I don't think they'd heard of SWOP. I don't think they'd heard of Scarlet Alliance. And I was like, you've got the Red Book here. You've got publications from them in your office. And they were so clueless. And they were like, oh, can you get us in contact? And I was like, okay, I don't see how this is... Something's fallen through the cracks here, but there's a lot of work to be done there for sure.
And there is. And I guess that's a big part of why SWOP is out there and doing all of this, because, and it's I love doing it. As you can tell, I love the sound of my own voice. So I loved going and I love talking to them. Voice. Thank you. And I just love just telling them and just letting them know what it is and that we do. And doing some sensitivity training, that's really important as well, because you've got people that work in the health system and at health services that haven't a clue about the sex industry, and they've made up their own mind about who we are and what we are, and a lot of it is bad. A lot of it is bad, and sort of like that brushes off when we go to get our tests, and they're brings on those stupid comments and,
Yeah, you certainly wouldn't go back regularly to get tested if you felt like you were going to be judged. I know that here in Canberra, the sexual health clinic that I go to is extremely compassionate and treats me with so much dignity, and they never make me feel anything but respected when I go there. And I would guarantee that they've had meetings with SWOP, or I believe they're Meridian here in Canberra now, which is wonderful, but I can definitely see that if you were going in to get your testing done and people were making you feel, less than, that would disincentivize it massively. So knowing that, somebody's out there advocating in those spaces is really helpful.
Yeah, and the good, and you're right, because it's through organisations like SWOP and all of the other sister sex worker organisations around Australia. We go out there and we're in the community there, we're in there. We target, I guess, well, anyway, SWOP does anyway. We target the most priority people that we need to, so the police, then of course the health services, they're our main go-tos, because it's constantly changing as well with those services. Like, you can go in 1 month, do that training, and then the next month they're gone and they've moved on somewhere else. But the hope is that they've taken that information and carried it over to wherever they've gone to. However, where they've left from, you've got a new worker that's taken their place who has no bloody clue. So it's kind of like an ongoing thing that we have to do. And the good thing about SWOP is that we have such a great rapport with all of these services that they will call us and say, hey, we've got some new workers that have come in. Is it possible for SWOP to come and do some training with them and all of that stuff? Hell yeah, we'd love to do that training. We're there.
So they're actually proactive. It's not you having to chase them down.
No, and that's the good thing about here and being in New South Wales, and I guess having decrim, that they're also too, they're free to give us a call, whereas before they would never have thought of that. Never, because they would not want to instigate themselves and put themselves and line themselves up with a sex work organisation, full stop. But today it's very, very different.
So that's all of the questions that Holly and I had, but we always do reach out to our patrons when we're having a guest on, and we like to include their questions. So we've got a couple more for you. I know we've held you for a little while today.
That's okay.
You're too interesting. It's your fault. So first up, I would not know how to answer this one, so good luck. What would you say has been the most rewarding part of your journey in the sex industry? I reckon you can include time as a sex worker and with SWOP, whichever one.
Oh, gosh. Okay. As a sex worker, I think for me the most rewarding thing as a sex worker is finding myself and discovering who I am in the sex industry, because that's helped immensely. I came into the industry not knowing anything about sex, at all. And then the journey I've been on and being in the industry for so long, oh my God, there's so many ways to have sex, so many ways. And that's been so rewarding for me. Some of it I've got into, and other things, I might pass on that one. But each to their own. It's given me a very open mind to what turns people on, and that's been really, really rewarding for me in the sex industry. Of course, finding myself and really appreciating that independence as a sex worker. I'm not working for the man, I'm working for myself, I don't answer to no one else but me, I choose who I want to see when I want to see them. That's been really, really rewarding. With SWOP, for me there's many, but I'll pluck out one rewarding moment, and that's the opportunity to be able to kind of support my community in a way where I can go out there and spread the news about the industry, and hopefully that they get it. These people that I speak to, the other thing I do is I will attend conferences and go around. I've been to Durban, and stood up at a presentation and done a presentation, and that's been really, really rewarding, to be able to. Who'd have ever bloomin' thought that this street-based sex worker from the 80s was going to be one day standing up in front of thousands of people talking about sucking cock, licking ass, and having a bloody good time, I would not have thought that. It was certainly not something that I chose, but hey, I'm here. And
how bloody good is that?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and
fantastic.
to be able to pass on all of that, the knowledge that I've learned from SWOP, because it's not just my voice, it's the whole of SWOP's voice. Everyone that works at SWOP has a story, and I'm so grateful to be here at SWOP to learn those stories and be able to use those stories in a way that benefit our community, and make it better and easier for them to maybe come forward and speak out, or to have a place where they can call and speak to a peer, That's been really, really rewarding, and especially during the pandemic. We've got this pandemic that's happening and our community is struggling. Some of us are struggling in that community. I'm very grateful that I have a job. Half of our community don't have jobs anymore, because of the pandemic. Brothels are closed, massage parlours are closed, street-based sex work, everything's just closed, it's shut down.
The streets are empty.
Absolutely. So, I'm grateful to have a job and be here today. But I think I'm a storyteller, as you can tell, and I love telling these stories. In the aid that it's going to benefit our community, everyone in our community. Doesn't matter what gender you are, who you are, what colour you are. You're in the sex industry. I just love doing what I do. I love being who I am and being able to go out there,
The next question from our patrons is, did you ever doubt yourself as a sex worker and or activist, and how did you overcome those fears?
I did doubt myself as a sex worker a couple of times. There were times when I stood down on that street in the cold winter nights and just thought, fuck, you know, there has to be something better than this, you know, having to come down here, freeze your ass off and do what, you know, just to get a couple of $100, you know. So there were quite a few moments where I had doubts about being a sex worker, and then especially on the street. And how I overcame that was I decided, and it was a client actually who I saw, who was really lovely. One of the very few clients that we have. So if you guys are out there listening, there are some really goodies out there. He said to me, "You're in the wrong place and you're in the wrong business. You know, you should be doing something else." And I went, "Well, thank you very much for your opinion. All I want is your money, okay, so I can get out of your car." Right. But
we can't pay our rent and opinions.
Yeah, but that stuck with me, what he said, and I thought to myself, wow, okay, so maybe, you know, I'll try and get a job. And as I mentioned before, it was really, really hard before I transitioned to get a job, but it was even harder to get a job once I transitioned. So I forced myself to go out and get a so-called normal job. And what happened was, once I got that job, I worked my way up to getting the job that I wanted, and that was to work in sales. What else? I mean, you know, what do hookers do? What we're good at? Selling.
We sell.
And so, yeah, I went into sales, and kind of like what I would do is I'd do sales for a couple of years, I'd get over that and then jump back into the sex industry. And so I would, you know, jump between the two jobs. And throughout my whole over 25 years, that's what I did, you know. And so that addressed that whole, how did I get over that, you know, not wanting to be in the sex industry. It's not for everyone and it doesn't work for everyone, but it worked for me.
What would you say is the number one difficulty faced by those that you meet through your outreach work?
For now, in this pandemic, is connecting with our community, because not all of us are huggers, but a majority of us love to have a hug, you know, now and then, and also we love to be able to talk with each other. So it's been really, really difficult, because SWOP also too delivers food boxes, okay, and through the pandemic, we did it all through last year, and we're doing it again this year. But that's been really, really hard, and the two deliveries have been different as well. Last year, we were able to stand and talk for 5 or 10 minutes, however long we could stand there, drop a food box off, and actually take time out to connect and engage with our community member, you know, talk to other workers, and that's what we miss the most. This year, we're not able to do that. It's a no-contact drop-off now, and that's really, really difficult, you know. You've got somebody who wants to talk and reach out, and so we're having to guide them to the phone and get them to give us a call, and it's really, really difficult. I hate it because I'm so used to being there and being able to talk with you know, workers and be able to hear them out, because I mean, it's so isolating, and we get it, but that's been really difficult. The other difficulty in the sex industry is not being, I guess, having workers come forward with some of these horrible things that are happening to them that were happening to us way back in the day. They're still happening, and that's really difficult to sometimes hear, you know, the sexual assaults, you know, the bashings, you know, and not only from the clients but also too from their partners. So the whole domestic violence thing is kind of really difficult.
Yeah, it's got to be tough to hear that.
Yeah, and it is. Yeah, and kind of like we're so lucky, you know, we have a lovely counsellor who's been with us for over 20 years, and she is definitely the person that we will refer the worker to if they're comfortable. Sometimes the workers are just happy to talk to their outreach workers like us, and you know, that's where they don't want to go any further, but just having somebody to hear them out, that's enough for them. And they go, "Thank you, Chantell, it's been really lovely speaking to you." That and really breaks. Yes, yeah, exactly.
So important. The importance of peerness.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Do you have any advice for clients of street-based sex workers on how they can be a better client?
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
It may have changed a lot, I guess, since you last...
Well, it has. Yeah, definitely it has. So the street-based sex work has...
Things never changed.
Yeah, and look, you know, and there are, in New South Wales anyway, there are still some street-based areas that we visit. And I guess... one of the things that I'd like to let the clients know is that, you know, just to think about what they're doing when they pick a worker up on the street, because, it's the workers put a lot of effort into getting ready and getting themselves together and getting down there full stop. Some of the workers have been standing around for ages and ages. So when you pick up a worker, it's all about respect, just be respectful. And then pay the money, just pay the bloody money. Don't blimmin' start haggling, I know it's part and parcel of the job and it shouldn't happen. Like when you say this is the price for this, you should pay it. But, guys are not going to do that. They're going to haggle. Just pay it, and also I guess at the end of the day, it's just respecting the workers, and treating us with respect. Because, hey, that's what we're all about, We're going to give you a service. And yeah, exactly. And it's a two-way thing as well, so...
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny that some people don't seem to understand that if you treat... It comes back at you. It's the same with any service professional. If you're nice to them, they're probably going to give you a good service. It's pretty basic.
That's right, exactly.
You really want to be nice to the person who's putting your cock in their mouth. Like, that's probably the person you want to be nicest to.
Especially if they have teeth.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you want...
Absolutely.
I feel like that's...
You'd think so, but there's all this stuff gets into, isn't it? All the stigma and what society's told them and all of that just gets in the way.
Exactly. I think also to porn clients who watch porn, stop watching porn, coming down, and this is for all sex workers as well. When you pick up a sex worker, please don't think that they're from a porn fucking show that you've seen, because it doesn't work like that. It does not work like that. Porn is porn. They have breaks, that you don't see, so don't pick us up and then expect to be pounding us for ages and ages and ages. It ain't bloody worth it, Please get over it. We're not in the porn show. This is reality. You're sticking it in, you're getting your rocks off and you're pulling it out. That's it. And go. Just, oh my God. It's just a nightmare when they do that and they go, I was watching this porn and we were in this, I'm not going to do that. I'm so sorry. That is not inclusive of this job. I'm so sorry. If you need somebody to get into backflips and, tip them upside down.
Can't.
No, absolutely, and and accepting that no is no, that's it.
Thanks so much for joining us today, Chantell. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. It was an absolute pleasure.
Oh, wonderful.
Thank you.
See ya.
Okay,
See ya.
bye.
As always, we'd love to thank our wonderful patrons this week for supporting us. Our new giving somebodies are Ms. Rainbow and Liz. Our new very generous somebodies are Cy Jaden Lilith, Evelyn Hunt, Josie and Crispy Cola. Our even more generous somebodies are Timmy, Andrew, Adam Smith, Leo, Lachlan, Cass, Sub London, Miss Billy, Diane Needs and Nora Knightley.
And our extremely generous somebodies are Aaron, Samuel, Andrew, Pete and Theodore Betts, the First Esquire.
Thanks so much for joining us this week, guys. We hope you've had fun and learned some interesting things. I look forward to seeing you next time.
Please look out for us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook and Patreon. Our name everywhere is Somebody You Pod, as in podcast. Our Patreon starts at just $3 a month, and you can get all of our episodes ad-free and a day early, plus bonus episodes, behind-the-scenes action, bloopers, and more. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the voices of sex workers. And remember, somebody you love might just be a sex worker.